How does a man from Belfast, Ireland, become one of the founding pioneers of the city of Los Angeles and a figure of worship and derision in California? And what does he have to do with Santa Clarita? Keep watching to find out. Welcome to Fridays in the Valley from College of the Canyons, a foray into how Santa Clarita became the community it is today. In this program, we will be discussing the role of water in the growth of the valley. Water has been both a boon and a tragedy for this community, and the story of the development of the community and of its water supply can hardly be separated. The first and foremost point to consider is that California actually has an incredible water supply. We have crystalline lakes filled with the purest water on earth. The problem is that all of that water is in parts of the state where few, if any, people actually live. To compound the problem, the water that we do have tends to find the fastest path to the ocean, and so most of us live in areas that either flood or go dry. It's hard to imagine now, but Southern California used to flood regularly. If you've ever been to Olvera Street, you may think you have seen the historic core of LA, but in fact, Olvera Street was relocated as a result of flooding in the early part of the 19th century. The street you see now is a result of that original flooding. So, with the problem of water in California clearly spelled out, the biggest issue anyone settling the state has had to deal with is how to get water. Some mastered that problem early on, and the best at doing it were the residents of Los Angeles. In fact, developers and people of Los Angeles can be seen as the greatest manipulators of nature and humans that the world has ever seen. You see, there should be no city here. We are surrounded on three sides by mountain, and we face an ocean without a harbor and a strong current flowing in the wrong direction. The only natural source of fresh water is a river that knows only two modes: bone dry or raging torrent. The men who mastered that manipulation of people and geography are the true fathers of the city we inhabit today, and their path runs directly through our Santa Clarita Valley. In 1904, residents of the Santa Clarita Valley would probably have been forgiven for not noticing a pair of men trekking slowly through the valley on their buckboard wagon. They are supposedly carrying copious amounts of whiskey and dropping bottles all along the way. It would probably have come as something of a surprise to know that one of the men was the former mayor of Los Angeles, Frederick Eaton, and the other, the chief engineer of LA's Department of Water and Power, William Mulholland. They were heading through the valley on their way to the Owens Valley, some 230 miles away. What they had in mind was one of the most audacious crimes in American history. They are planning the greatest water heist ever. The story of that heist is epic, and if you click on the top right, you can find out more about it. But for now, let's concentrate on how that trip affected Santa Clarita. By 1907, workmen were busy right by the Saugus train station, across the street from the current Saugus Cafe, unloading materials and staging them for an aqueduct that would connect Los Angeles to the Owens River 233 miles away. For the next 6 years, there would be construction work in the valley to put a 10-foot diameter pipe through to feed the Cascades, just over the hill by where Balboa Boulevard meets the Ridge Route. On November 5, 1913, Mulholland and Eaton presided over the opening of that aqueduct, accompanied by nearly the entire population of the city, who bought commemorative souvenir bottles to fill with the water that would ensure the continued growth of Los Angeles. The community had apportioned $26 million. That's $709 million in today's dollars, and all of that with a population of just 200,000. Never had a community invested so much time, energy, and money into its own future development. At the time, Mulholland uttered an odd phrase that has since come to define the problem of water in California. He said we were doomed to success. At first glance, it may seem as though he misspoke, but his words turned out to be prophetic. For almost immediately after securing the water of the Owens Valley, Los Angeles began to outgrow it, and more sources of water had to be found. Eventually, LA would drain not only the Owens Valley, but also Mono Lake further to the north. Today, the California Water Project runs 700 miles and directs water from the Sierras into LA's gaping maw, with water from the Colorado River through the Hoover Dam. But all of this came at a terrible cost. By 1926, the need for water necessitated the construction of an additional reservoir far up San Francisco Canyon here in Santa Clarita. On March 12, 1928, in the midst of the water wars with the Owens Valley, and shortly after the reservoir had finally filled to capacity, as cracks and weeping water had been noticed but ignored, the reservoir failed spectacularly. Just over 70 billion tons of water began to make its way down the narrow San Francisco Canyon until it reached the dry Santa Clara riverbed, where it made a hard right on its way to another right past the future Magic Mountain, and then turned left at Castaic Junction, where it continued on through Piru, Fillmore, and Santa Paula on its way to Ventura and the ocean. Bodies from Santa Clarita washed up as far away as San Diego. The exact death toll was never calculated, but the best estimate is 431 people died in the greatest engineering failure in California history. In Santa Clarita, cowboy legend Bill Hart stepped in to provide help and pay for funerals. In Los Angeles, the reaction was swift. The face of the Mulholland Dam, which overlooked Hollywood and had the same dimensions and construction methods as the St. Francis, was immediately covered with dirt and plants so that new residents of Hollywood would never know that they were underneath the humongous dam. No other effort was made to reinforce the actual structure. The importance of Santa Clarita, however, meant that water development continued. In 1934, the Bouquet Reservoir was quietly completed, and in 1973, the Castaic Dam, which ended up covering parts of the old Castaic, opened to provide both water and recreation. Current residents of Santa Clarita probably aren't aware of how important their valley is to the story of water, and yet right next to Saugus High is the Los Angeles Aqueduct. Every time you go over the hill into the San Fernando Valley, you pass the cascades that mark the end of the aqueduct that let Los Angeles have the suburbs so many of us live in. Above us and next to us are Lake Elizabeth, Lake Castaic, the Bouquet Reservoir, and several others. Many in our valley are employed by the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, whose reach in this valley runs long and deep. Today, facing climate change and with a far better understanding of the problems of water, we are still facing the reality of Mulholland's prophecy that we are doomed to success. We always need more water, and Santa Clarita is integral to supplying and managing that water. As we see more efforts towards conservation and management, we face the attitudes, history, and tradition of both the costs and the glories of bringing water to the Southland. Thank you for watching, and please like and subscribe. See you next time.